Hello and welcome to Cage Fighting. It's your main man Andy Gillard here. Hope everyone's keeping safe out there.
Hi everyone, Matt Guy here. How are we all doing?
Bone saws ready. Hello, it's Stu.
And we have with us a special guest. We've got Mr. Ash Dolan. Ash, how are we this evening?
Hi guys, yeah, it's great. How are you guys?
All good, thank you. Obviously, you know, as a listener, you know that we have to ask you 3 questions, being since you're a guest on the podcast. So we'll jump straight in. Obviously, it's a Nick Cage podcast. So what is your Nick Cage film of choice?
It's certainly not Wicker Man. I don't know whether to go for it. It might be a cheat, but I'm going to have to go for Kick-Ass, I think. As a film itself, it's fantastic.
Great choice.
I thought he was so Shatner in it. He was just fantastic, just so different, really.
Yeah, that's a good one. Obviously, I know you used to work in a cinema. Do you have any secrets on how you would prepare your snacks for the cinema? Would you like to get any deals or anything when you were going in there?
I wouldn't get the cheese on the nachos because I know where it comes from. I've made the cheese for the nachos and never again. When
Was it a sex theatre?
A reputable chain. When the cheese isn't fully cheese, it's only 60% cheese. Then you tend to steer a bit clear, and when it comes out of the tin as well.
Oh God, that sounds grim.
Add water too.
Oh God, definitely not.
Yeah.
So, what is your cinema snack of choice?
So usually when you go sweet or salted, knowing as I've scooped the sweet or salted, if you just say sweet, the person just turns off. So I usually go with a bit of a mix and just say, can you not just go sweet and salted? Can you go sweet, salted, just to watch their heads explode?
Actually, say that I actually had a packet of sweet and salted popcorn from Aldi the other day. I haven't had that for a long time, and actually, it wasn't bad.
Oh, it's lovely.
I've tried I think it was Butterkist did one, and it was absolutely rank. So I've never had another one of those, but I do generally like sweet and salted stuff together. Like salted caramel is fantastic. And obviously the other question then, if you could only watch one film for the rest of your life, what film is it going to be?
See, I was going to say Armageddon, but after your last guest, absolutely putting it in the pits, I don't think I can now. But I think a quite able substitute, I'm going to go with About Time from 2013 with Domhnall Gleeson and Rachel McAdams. It's an absolutely fantastic love film.
Like I love Domhnall Gleeson. I think he's a brilliant actor, and he's one of these who still goes a little bit under the radar. I think people they might know his face, but don't necessarily know his name. Obviously, if you've seen Black Mirror, he's in the episode with Hayley Atwell where he plays the body, the robotic body of a deceased version of himself, I suppose you'd say. But yeah, a great actor, really good. And one of my favourite things about that film is it's got Ben Folds on the soundtrack, and Ben Folds just doesn't seem to get the recognition in this country. A lot of people don't know him, and I'm such a huge fan of his work. So, top call that one is.
Domhnall Gleeson, also General Hux in the newest Star Wars trilogy as well. The best ones.
He has a major role in the best Star Wars film.
Yeah, the last one.
So this week we have got something a little bit different. It's because it's the 20th. We're going to do a top 5s. We have Ash on because Ash is a wrestling aficionado, having been to numerous WrestleManias. So we're going to be talking about our top 5 films starring a wrestler. We do have a few rules because otherwise it will just end up being a top 5 of The Rock's films, to be perfectly honest. So the rules for this podcast. So the first one is you can only use a wrestler once. It cannot be a documentary about wrestling or a wrestler. It has to be someone primarily known for wrestling. Obviously, Mr. T was an actor who wrestled, not a wrestler who acted. They have to have a role of substance. So it can't just be like Hulk Hogan's cameo in Gremlins 2. And if the film has more than one wrestler in it, you cannot use that wrestler in another one. So if you go for Ready to Rumble starring Juventud Guerrera, you couldn't then take Trainwreck because John Cena stars in Ready to Rumble as well. The sixth rule would have been, if you have any honourable mentions, that the other rules do not apply. So we'll go around the table. So my first pick, we're going back to the 80s. It's a Jesse Ventura film. And it is one we mentioned the other week, funnily enough. It's The Running Man. I absolutely love The Running Man. It's one of the early Arnie films I watched where I think I genuinely thought he was a good actor, not just cause, I mean, in the Terminator films, don't get me wrong, they're good films, but he's not a good actor in them. He just plays a monotone. You can just project your image upon him. He doesn't really do much. But I felt that in The Running Man, you did genuinely feel peril for his character, like he was in trouble. And there was a really good story. And because I grew up playing Nintendo and I've always been a bit of a gamer, that felt like I was watching a computer game on the big screen. So that's why I've always loved The Running Man. I've always had a soft spot. And it's one of the first DVDs I ever purchased. It was like one of the vanilla DVDs where there was no extras or anything. And I think it was like 25 quid. It was really expensive for it. But that was one of the first ones. It wasn't the first one, but one of the first ones. So yeah, my choice was The Running Man. Fellas, are we fans of that film? Or...
Yeah, I'd definitely say so, yeah.
That was nearly in mine, to be fair. But I just thought, well, we'll see. But yeah, I love that film. And when we were talking about it the other week when it was being talked about as being redone again.
Edgar Wright, yeah. Edgar Wright's directing the remake, isn't he?
And like I said at the time, I don't want it to happen. Just leave it as it is.
Yeah, I get that. So Matt, you're up next.
So I'm having a very, very early Dwayne Johnson entry on my list, because I assume he's going to be like featuring quite heavily on all of it. And I need to kind of preface my list by saying this is heavily influenced by the wrestlers themselves in terms of me liking them as wrestlers, not as their quality in the films, I should say, at this point, before I get inundated with hate. But it would be the Rockers dancing in The Other Guys. Now, it's only like a fleeting appearance, really, but it is at the start of the film. And this reminds me so much of when he was kind of like the icon Rock, when he did like the concert in Sacramento, and he's that like really obnoxious, full of himself, arrogant Rock, and that was like my favorite period of watching The Rock. And he's just like that in this, and when he's coupled with Samuel L. Jackson as well, he just makes a fantastically arrogant character. That it's a shame. And they could do more with that, but I don't think the other guys really had the appeal or had the reception that there's an appetite for any more. But I think anytime The Rock can play a dickhead, he does it fantastically well, like any good heel, really. And that's why he's my number 5 pick, because it's just not enough of his performance in that to justify being any higher.
Fair enough. Stu, what's your 5?
Well, let's take it slightly less serious and go with what's the instant giggle. A cult classic that I did recommend to us to watch, which Andy kind of shut down straight away. And it's Suburban Commando, Hulk Hogan. And it's pretty much a fish out of water tale 8, really, but set to the wacky goings on of the late 80s, early 90s, with a big star at the time in an unusual situation. I haven't watched it for a long time, and I watched the trailer earlier, and it's got me interested again. And I really am feeling watching this film over the weekend now, because it's just stupid. It's intergalactic. I can't remember now, but he's from outer space and he's settling in suburban America, and so skateboards and cat up trees and that kind of thing. It's just nonsense. But I know he's obviously Hulk Hogan's a problematic character at best over the last 10 years. But as I always say, take away the man from the art, which is what this film really is. And it's, if you want something stupid to watch with the wrestler in it, then watch this.
I watched it probably 2 or 3 years back, and it's worse than I remember. I think I went to the cinema to see it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I went to the cinema to see it, and I remember enjoying it at the time because it was 1991 and I liked wrestling. But watching it with my now 30-something head on, it's really, really bad. I watched that, and I watched the other Hulk Hogan
Mr.
quote unquote classic, Mr. Nanny, and it's it's fucking horrific. Like you can tell why he never had a career in acting, to be perfectly honest. Ash, what's your fifth one, please?
I'm going down the leave your brain at the door route as well, and I'm going for the Expendables with Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's a who's who of old action heroes, and as Stone Cold, you gotta love Stone Cold, haven't you? I think even non-wrestling fans love Stone Cold, and he kicked that much ass in Expendables. He actually gave Sly Stallone a hairline fracture during their fight scene. So how can you say no to Stone Cold?
I haven't got it on my list, but I really liked Stone Cold in The Condemned with Vinnie Jones.
Yes.
Like, that's a cracking film, and like you say, how can you not like Stone Cold? He's very charismatic. He always plays a version of Stone Cold Steve Austin, but it works. So why would you change it from that?
Yeah,
it's a cracking choice.
I mean, of the modern era, Stone Cold was my favourite anyway. I mean, like when we went out for drinks with Goldie the other I was going to say the other month, but it was probably about a year or 2 years ago. When I grew a goatee and had the 316 t-shirt, just walking around town with that on. I mean, you didn't even try, to be fair.
I went with Mick Foley, which was basically a plaid shirt over a Cactus Jack t-shirt, which is pretty much what I would have worn anyway.
But yeah, so can't argue with that. You have to love Stone Cold. It's the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. So my fourth choice then. See, I've gone completely the other way, and this is something I don't feel like I could not put this film on the list because the film is magnificent, even though I don't know a great deal about the wrestler. So the wrestler is actually the Zebra Kid, and he was in The Godfather. So he played Luca Brasi in The Godfather, who is such a pivotal character in that movie. Like the whole thing about sleeps with the fishes and all that stuff. That's from him. Like that character has become something of a cultural icon. And I wouldn't have even known that he was a wrestler until like doing research for this. But as soon as I saw that on the list, I thought I can't ignore The Godfather as a film because that's probably the best film starring a wrestler, even though it's not the best wrestler, maybe. But yeah, the Godfather, just a magnificent 1-2 punch. The third one, not so much, but first two, fantastic.
As a side, have you read the Godfather book, Andy?
I have not. On YouTube, I found the audiobooks, so that was the plan, was to play through those once I've caught up on a couple of podcasts I'm listening through.
Yeah, you should, because I read the book many, many years ago, and I've not that long finished the audio book as well, and it goes into quite a deep dive on Luca Brasi. It's really entertaining. I mean, the whole book is an expanded version of the film. A lot into like Luca Brasi's really, really interesting story as well about how brutal the man was. Like that doesn't really come across in the film. He comes across a bit dim-witted. But he's anything but in the book. Really, really interesting to read.
Yeah, I've been reading some stuff about it because I was thinking about getting the books because I think Mario Puzo did, was it 4 books set within the family? And I was reading about some of the stuff like with him telling the what you call it, the nurse to throw his baby on the fire because he doesn't want that breed.
Yeah.
Because he had a relationship with an Irish woman, I believe, if I remember correctly. And they talk about like how harsh he was. So I am tempted to get all of the books, to be honest, and really find out more about the whole situation. So your fourth, please, Matt.
So I again went down kind of the my favourite wrestler kind of thing as opposed to actual cinematic great films. Although actually this film is pretty good. I've gone for Kurt Angle as Cobra in Warrior. The MMA film that basically is like Nuts magazine, but for women, but actually for women when it comes to like watching sweaty men gratuitously wrestle each other. But yeah, I mean, it's a really, really great film. It's like adrenaline fueled, and it's really kind of like, it's macho, it's testosterone, but it's not done in it's not done in a cheesy way, or it's not done in a way I don't think that's kind of, I don't know how to put it. It just feels like it has a bit of substance. It has like some different plot lines going on. It's not like a Mortal Kombat. They just turn up for a tournament and that's it. There are actual stakes on the line for some of the characters that are involved, which I think is entertaining. But again, this harks back to like my favorite period, like Kurt Angle, when he's like the wrestling machine. He's known obviously for his comedy stuff, which probably a lot of people would remember him for. But I really liked him when he was just German suplexing badass, much like Taz and wrestlers like that. And this harks back to that. And it is a great film that you can just watch when you need a bit of a boost. I mean, listen, I don't think I'll look like even the most unfittest person that fought in that film, but it's still like a heart racing film that I think Kurt Angle does a really good job as being a legitimate badass in it as well. I mean, he won an Olympic gold medal with a broken freaking neck. Do you know what I mean? So he is a badass, and it just shows that he comes across as that in the film.
Yeah, and obviously it's starring Tom Hardy, who is one of those actors who I will watch in pretty much anything. I just think he's a fascinating actor. He's sort of like the new breed of the De Niro's for me. Like, he's proper method. Like, if he needs to put on 60 pounds for a role, he's going to be getting into the donuts straight away. And I appreciate that rather than someone who'll just put on a fat suit. I like that kind of actor, so a big fan of his work.
Capone's been panned recently, though, hasn't it? I don't know if you've seen any of the articles recently. It's not come across as very well received. I haven't seen it yet myself, but it's not hit some of the high notes that some of his previous endeavours have received, unfortunately.
They can't all be gold.
Well, no, they can't. No.
And I would imagine, I haven't got around to watching it yet, but I would imagine his performance is great, even if the film isn't, because he's that kind of actor that he does give himself to the role.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, that one's on my Netflix list. I just haven't got around to it yet.
Yeah, he did a series for the BBC that was not very good at all, but he was the best thing about it. I'm trying to
Taboo.
Yeah, Taboo, that's the one.
That's proper divisive. I didn't see it, but some people loved it and some people absolutely hated it.
Yes, 16 episodes, 2017. Because I had to go through his IMDb to even look at what the name of it was. But he wasn't, let's say he was a star, he wasn't even in every episode, but he was superb in that. And it was, I think it was wrong thing, wrong time kind of thing. I think if you had to put it out in lockdown when there was nothing else on, I think it would have got a proper audience then. But it was like the height of the streaming war starting off, and it just kind of got lost on BBC One. But I mean, there was promise for a second season, it never happened, so we'll probably never get any more of it. But yeah, he was the best thing about that, absolutely.
Have any of you seen the one set in the Black Country?
Peaky Blinders.
Blinders.
So the Grimleys.
The Grimleys, fucking hell. No, he's in Peaky Blinders for a season, isn't he?
Yeah, he's fantastic in it as well. Really, really entertaining.
Not just a season, he's a recurring character later on. He comes back.
Oh, okay. Right. I saw the very first episode, really liked it, and then for whatever reason just kept missing it and never got around to catching up on it.
So this is a crime. It's
I
an
know. I know.
I mean, the Matrix 2 and 3 is a crime in itself, but until it's watched, still going about it. But Peaky Blinders, you've got nothing else to do. Watch that. It's on iPlayer.
You know, the worst thing is, though, Stu, like, I was checking out my film list yesterday, and the film I watched last night was my 49th film of the year. So I've got no excuse for not catching up on some of the good stuff when I'm watching shit like Safer at Home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's March.
I know. It's early March as well. So can I get... where am I? Oh, it's yours, Stu. What's your number 4, please?
I mentioned him earlier, Bonesaw himself, Randy Savage in Spider-Man. And I know it's kind of bending the rules a bit because he's not really in it, but he's a pivotal moment in Spider-Man where... Well, the original Raimi Spider-Man, just for clarity. A lot of people don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, when he's the Spider-Man entering the ring for the first time to test his powers out, and it's Randy Savage looking very roided up, we have to be honest.
And wasn't he?
Well, yeah. But he was one of them where he was one of my... I mean, the aforementioned party Goldie dressed up as Randy Savage. To much hilarity until his hat was stolen. But yeah, he was one of my heroes of the 90s just for the whole ludicrousy of it all. So seeing him again in that, not knowing that he was going to be in it, was a kind of a eureka moment. And he was only in it for 4 minutes or whatever, but if he wasn't in that ring, then Peter Parker wouldn't have descended into his transformation into Spider-Man. So it's essential.
I think that's a fair argument, to be honest. It is, like you say, it's pivotal in the film. It helps Spidey figure out who he is. I would agree as well. Like, I was a big Savage fan as a kid. I never really liked Hulk Hogan because he was just quite boring in the ring. Whereas with Savage, you always felt that he was actually in peril. As a babyface, like you genuinely thought when Jake Roberts got his snake to bite him on the arm. That's one of the most... I don't know, that image is burned into my retinas. Like, it's a proper great moment in wrestling history. And yeah, I love Randy Savage way back when. So your 4th, please, Ash.
I'm probably going with the newest film, I reckon, on this list. I'm going with Hobbs and Shaw with The Rock. It can also be doubled up with Roman Reigns as well.
Yes.
Again, it says a bit more about me, but I'm going for another Leave Your Brain at the Door film in the Fast and Furious franchise.
Best way to be.
But having the Stafe and having The Rock together, apart from maybe Kevin Hart, he's probably his best duo on screen. It's just fantastic, mindless action, isn't it? And with The Rock and his charisma, you just can't say no to it. Going to Samoa, having the big fight scene at the end with the Madcap hooking about 5 cars to stop a helicopter getting away. It's fantastic stuff.
My favourite bit about that, though, is that they go from Russia straight to Samoa, and it seems to take them like 20 minutes, even though it's the other side of the world. Yeah, it's proper leave your brain at the door kind of stuff. I did love it, but it is batshit insane.
So that's the bit where you leave your brain at the door, the fact that they go from Russia to Samoa so quickly, with everything else that happens.
You just have to accept everything. In a world where a plane can pick up a car from, like, stationary, you have to be able to believe that you can traverse the world within 25 minutes. It's just the way it is, I'm afraid.
You don't make the rules.
Yeah,
That's it.
You're missing out, Matt. You really are.
I might.
Yes.
Of course you
massively.
are. Just watch it from number 5 when The Rock comes in. They're fantastic films.
Yeah, you can pick it up from there as well. That's how bad they are. You don't need to have seen the first half of the films.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay, I might do that in that case.
Yeah. So the third one on my list is one we're going to skip over. It is Guardians of the Galaxy for Big Dave Bautista. So your number 3, please, Matt.
My number 3 is simply Thunderlips in the flesh, baby. Basically, Hulk Hogan in Rocky 3 as Thunderlips. Again, the best version of Hulk Hogan will always be NWO Hogan for me, and the arrogant superstar that he was. And he just plays this larger than life character in Rocky 3 where he's just such a dick. And it's brilliant. He did in such a short space of time. Maybe it was a precursor to things that we now know about Hulk Hogan himself. I don't think he listens to the podcast, so I don't think we'll get sued. But yeah, I think him and Sly Stallone's interactions on there really, it was just really well done. If I'm not mistaken, I think this would have been how Mr. T got into the kind of WrestleMania thing on the back of this, I believe, as well. I think it was his interaction with Hulk Hogan, I think, led to the WrestleMania. I think I might be wrong. I just think that Hulk Hogan, actually, probably, Andy, you know a bit more about this. Like, Hulk Hogan in Japan has always been like a monster, like not the babyface heel that he is when he's been in WWE. I think that he was playing this dick, huge beast of a man in Thunderlips, and it's just iconic, like the lines that he comes out with and how he's almost like a Ric Flair-ish character that he wanted to be, like this sex icon that actually in WWE he never was. I just think I think it's just an excellent short portrayal of a wrestler that actually I wish he'd done that more. I wish he'd been this larger than life, like fabulous Hulk Hogan or Nature Boy Hulk Hogan or something like that.
Yeah, because we never really got that side of Hulk Hogan in WWF as it was when he was there. He was always that take your vitamins, say your prayers kind of bollocks, for want of a better word. So it was quite good to see that he did have something else in his locker, even if it took until like the year 1998, was it, NWO?
97, wasn't it? Or something
Or 97, was it?
Round about that, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it took a few years to get to that point, but it was good to see something else. And yeah, like you say about his run in Japan, that was very much what he was. He was actually like quite athletic when he did his Japanese matches, rather than it wasn't just a leg drop. He was doing drop kicks and everything. He would have been something of a high flyer, I suppose, for what he became. That's a good choice. And I know we mentioned it on a pod a few weeks ago. I think we all said which our favourite Rocky films were. Ash, which is your favourite Rocky?
In what way do you mean? Because there's
I mean, I think Rocky 1 is probably the best Rocky. I think it's well written. I mean, it won an Oscar for a reason. But Rocky 3 is my favourite. It's the one I have the most fun watching personally.
See, I was quite lucky when in between the lockdowns, my local cinema played all the Rockies.
Oh.
So I got to go and watch all 6. And as much as I want to say 1, it's got to be 4. 4 is the greatest musical ever known, and I include Hamilton in that. I'm sorry, but you can't. Hearts on Fire is one of the greatest movie soundtrack songs ever. It really is.
We're going to have to do a top 5 at some point of the greatest songs in movie history. Yeah, I think that's going to have to be a future one. Have any of you seen the Creed films?
Yeah, I saw.
Yes.
I saw Creed 2 on a plane to, I think it was New York. I think that was a tremendous film. Creed 2, I thought it was really, really good, and harking back to Rocky 4 quite a bit to give you that nostalgia kick that you need as well sometimes.
Because that's it's Michael B. Jordan, isn't it? If I remember correctly, plays.
Yeah.
So I haven't got round to those yet, but they are on the list. Just the same as everything else is, to be honest.
Creed 1's quite interesting with having Tony Bellew as the fighter, as the main bad. And they actually have the fight at Goodison Park, which is where Stallone became an Everton fan. Now he's the big Everton fan, and that's why. Because they had the fight at Goodison Park. I imagine because of Bellew, because he wanted it to be at Goodison Park.
I did not know that.
Mm.
Good bit of footy trivia there. Stu, your number 3, please.
Well, my number 3. It was a dormant film from the 90s, then brought back to genius levels, and it's Dwayne Johnson's portrayal in Jumanji. Superb. Just fun. Just pure fun. It has no right, that and the sequel, have no right being anywhere near as good as they actually are. It's so layered as well. You could watch it absolutely pissed up. You could watch it first thing in the morning. You could watch it properly with family if you really. Could you? Yeah, you probably could watch it with family. They're just really good, fun films, both of them. But the first one in particular, because it was such a shock. And we mentioned his chemistry with the other people. Earlier when we were talking about Hobbs and Shaw, and he's just great, isn't he? He's just superb. And it's kind of like you can't really say much more about it because it's just great.
Yeah, I mean they properly managed to capture lightning in a bottle with that film. Like it, as you said, it had no right whatsoever to be anywhere near as good as it was. I remember seeing the trailer and I thought I don't want to see this film even though The Rock's in it because it's going to be awful. And I think I was dragged to see it on it might have been a New Year's Eve when it was released. And I absolutely adored it. I thought it was fantastic. And then when the sequel to that came out, I thought, well, this is obviously going to be shit then, isn't it? This is going to be the one film too far. And hell no, like it was still superb. And seeing The Rock playing Danny DeVito was just fucking incredible. Absolutely amazing. I properly enjoyed both of those films. I believe they're doing a third one, which is risky, but at the same time, like that they've earned the chance to try and make a perfect trilogy. I think.
Yeah, they've got to if they're trying to fail, then fine, but they've got to give it a go just because of how good they are.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Ash, your third, please.
This one, I had a real argument over, and it was either going to be Guardians of the Galaxy or which lost out to Infinity War. And I'm going with Dave Bautista for this one. And it was because I didn't know whether it was going to be a cameo or not. And doing the research, I saw a tweet from James Gunn where he said originally they were only supposed to cameo in Infinity War. But by the time that they were getting around to writing Guardians 2, they'd become so much more that they had to get a bigger place. So I had to put Infinity War in because I think Infinity War is probably the best Avengers film. I think it's better than Endgame. I think apart from the end of Endgame, I think Infinity War is a fantastic film. It's the best one of the four.
I think I agree with that because it's the Empire Strikes Back of the Avengers franchise, isn't it? I suppose it's the one with the downbeat ending. It's the one that it leaves you wanting more.
Yeah.
Whereas the others don't. And like Endgame's good, but it's far too long. Like it's at least an hour longer than it needed to be.
Not long enough.
But yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd say that's probably the best. Yeah, it's definitely the best of the Avengers. Maybe not the best of all of the Marvel films.
I think Dave has the best part in the entire film as well when they're on the ship and Gamora is telling Star-Lord that if Thanos gets her, he knows what to do. And then you just cut back and there's Drax eating his food. And he's mastered invisibility.
Can't see me.
You can't see me.
Fantastic. I'm a big fan of Dave Bautista, to be fair. He seems like such a cool dude as well.
Well, Andy, I don't know if I've said this story before. I've told you the story about when I met him, didn't I? And he was a massive
think
dick.
you have. Yeah.
You've met Batista.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing to shout about, mate. I skived from school to meet him at Woolworths in Wolverhampton when he was on like a WrestleMania revenge tour or something like that. And I waited for like hours. I met him. I shook his hand. His hand, like his finger, engulfed my whole hand. And I barely got a grunt out of the guy. He didn't look at me. Didn't sign anything. And I was ushered along by the rep. And I was really annoyed. And so there's a picture of me in the paper in the Express Star looking dead moody. Like, you know how like you get in like the Daily Mail when they'll go to somebody's house that's had like an unexpected bill and they'll hold it up and they'll look really miserable. I look like that. And with a load of other people going like WWE star makes kids cry or something like that. yeah, he was right miserable, he was.
I've got to be honest, Matt, we've been to quite a few wrestling shows together. I don't think I would want to be meeting the great unwashed wrestling fans. I think I'd be quite miserable if I was Big Dave myself.
No, I suppose, but I mean, this is in Woolworths. This was prime real estate at the time. You know what I mean? He could have grabbed himself a Pick-a-Mix and got a sausage, beans, and chips for like £2 in the canteen. Cheer up, mate!
Didn't know the delights of Wolverhampton.
Was the little train not running? Maybe that's why he was angry.
Well, I suppose now I think back, maybe the justification was there.
Who's the best person you've met?
Roddy Piper was pretty cool. He was really, and he was like, he spent like a while as well. I met him at like a meet and greet, and he spent a lot of time with each person, and then did a lot of time in like the Q&As, and he was just a real like people person. Really nice guy he was, as well.
Fantastic.
I think mine, like Trent, I've managed to meet a couple of times, and he's always like quite chatty, but he's always so popular, especially because he's from Wolverhampton. Like everyone wants his time, so you don't get a lot of time with him. But Mick Foley, like he was quite happy to stand and chat with me and sign my book and everything, and that was quite cool. So I'd say Mick. Obviously, you've met quite a few, Ash. So who's your favourite?
I met Trent in an airport once. Trent and Tyler Bate at the same time. We just ended up talking about Wolves, so that was quite enjoyable. I'm trying to think now. To be honest, one of the best ones, and it was rushed for time, but he did take the time for you. It was Stone Cold, meeting Stone Cold Steve Austin. But I'd taken the supporting Kyle Ikemi shirt with me, the hashtag Team Keem shirt. And obviously, I think he thought that my mate was dying of leukemia. So he was proper thinking about it. So I had to blag it and go, yeah, he's my mate. But yeah, he was proper into it then. I nearly got him to bloody do a voiceover, but got pushed along too much. But no, Stone Cold was fantastic. He nearly broke my hand, just shaking his hand. Absolute guns on him.
Stu, have you ever met any wrestlers? I know you're not quite as big into your wrestling as we are, but have you met any in your time?
No. Simple as I've never been in them. I've never been in that situation, to be honest. And when you said about Trent, when he was at Molyneux, and no one knew who he was apart from you at the time in the group.
Yeah.
And no, it's. I mean, obviously, there's a certain tier of wrestler who I know who they are, but obviously, I've dipped in and out of it for the last 2 years, and I had that stretch 18 months ago when I watched everything for so long. But no, it's not my world that I inhabit.
I mean, if Fight Club Pro ever opens back up and we're allowed to go, you will have to come along.
Oh yeah,
it's a cracking night, and it's the atmosphere as much as the in-ring action is worth it. But whether or not it opens again is another story.
I know, that was my God. I can't remember the name of the Japanese wrestler who I accosted at the bar at the Gifford.
Oh,
Shio or She. I can't remember what the guy's name is now.
There's a picture of us somewhere on the internet.
Basically, it's
Ishiri somebody.
Yeah, that's it. It was like one of those the universal language of "Can I buy you a beer?" It's like, and then like I think his partner or his missus, she spoke a bit of English, and she was like, I'm not doing an impression. I don't want to like cultural appropriation, but she was basically like, WKD, WKD. So he just got the WKDs in. Then he looked at me literally as if I'd bought him like all of his drinks all night, as if like no one ever like it's like. Then we had a photo. We had a very brief chat. He was a proper sound guy. He was.
Mm. And we got to meet Eddie Kingston as well after Fight Club Pro Show, didn't we? That was quite cool.
Well, he got to meet me more. Like I just got rushed up to him, and I was like, "Are you Eddie Kingston?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my god!" Yeah, it was a proper fangirl moment. That was.
Yeah, and I spoke to the Schadenfreude lads, which was like, yeah, it was just a moment in history. It was brilliant. Anyway, we'll move back to films. My second film, starring Jerry the King Lawler, is Man in the Moon. I absolutely adore this movie. I was a big fan of Jim Carrey, and then it got to the point with his work where it just became very samey. Like, I don't know, I loved Ace Ventura at the time, but then everything became a version of Ace Ventura. And then he tried his hand at something a little bit different. This is where he played the legendary comic Andy Kaufman. And part of Andy Kaufman's story was he had a feud with Jerry the King Lawler. Kaufman decreed himself as the intergender wrestling champion and would beat up women in the ring. And Jerry Lawler finally stood up for himself. Stood up for the women of Memphis because he ran a show in Memphis, and they actually had this feud, and they went on a TV show together, which is documented in the Man in the Moon movie. I can't remember, but it's sort of like one of those David Letterman type shows. And they start out just being jovial, and then they get into a scrap, and it's all done completely in kayfabe, like they hate each other. But they was just playing a rib on everybody, and apparently the whole of the world just went absolutely apeshit over it. So that's mine. Man in the Moon is a really good movie that I think gets overlooked in Jim Carrey's catalogue, but it's one I always recommend to people. I think it's fantastic. Nice. So your second, please, Matt.
So this is really getting into the crunch territory now. And as previously mentioned, one of my favourites in and out of the ring in Roddy Piper in John Carpenter's They Live. Fantastic film that actually means probably more now in 2021 than it ever did. So not overly well received at the time, but it's kind of got a cult following. And if you've never seen it, it's kind of a sci-fi horror film where Roddy Piper's character basically uncovers a conspiracy that the ruling class are aliens and basically manipulate people through the media. And if there's ever a time for that at the moment, if you've watched The Social Dilemma any times, in the last during lockdown, you'll understand how these kind of things all link together. It goes on about how like we consume and we breed and we conform. And you know when you see things like Obey, I think that's even a brand. I'm not really into fashion, as you can probably tell. Though that's like directly linked with They Live, and it has a cultural impact as well. The film in the IT crowd, for example, the line when Moss says, "I've come here to drink milk and kick ass, and I've just finished my milk." Well, that's directly from They Live, except it's I've come here to chew bubblegum. Roddy Piper was made for more than wrestling, to be fair. He was extremely gifted on the microphone, and what he lacked in wrestling skill, he made up for being able to provoke and push people's buttons and push the envelope more than kind of anybody else. Now, he'd never even make air because of when he fought Mr. T, he wore loads of jewelry and said, I'm wearing more chains than your ancestors, and he painted himself half black and stuff like that. But at the time, it was pushing the envelope in terms of angering people, and that transcended into this film. Like he's just this larger of life character that exudes confidence and exudes charisma, and I think it was just really, really nicely done. I do have a signed copy of this poster by the man himself as well, in my garage, which is only like an A5. But it's I was really, really devastated when Roddy Piper died. It was a really difficult one because he was one of those that, like, if I was ever going to get into wrestling, I'd want to be like him as a talker and to piss people off for a living, and that's what I would want to be.
Yeah, and like you said, that line, I knew that line of "I came to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum." I knew that line before I knew the film.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it had such a wide-reaching thing, and and he's one of these guys. I've seen him in a few things. Like, he was in It's Always Sunny, and like, the dude had comedy chops.
Yeah,
like, he could crack a joke. Definitely more than just a wrestler. But I watched some of, I think it was WrestleMania 8 a couple of weeks back, which was him versus Bret Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. And even though he wasn't a particularly gifted technical or a high flyer, he knew how to tell stories in the ring. And I think he was absolutely superb for it. That's one of my all-time favourite matches, that is, even though it's between someone not particularly known for wrestling and Bret Hart, who was on his way to superstardom. But yeah, fantastic choice, that one. So your number 2, please, Stu.
I think we have to pass on this one as well, don't we? And it is Jesse Ventura in Predator.
Ashley, your number 2.
I'm going for WWE Studios' finest. See No Evil. Featuring Kane. Now, I love a good horror film. Even if...
What is this?
So why have you picked this?
No, I'm not having it. This is a good horror film. If you go back to the 80s style horror film, this is cut and dry. A bunch of not likable kids running around being generally quite deplorable, and Kane picking them off one by one. It's horror film 101. If you put a hockey mask on him, it would just be a Friday the 13th movie. I love Friday the 13th, and this is basically that, except he takes people's eyeballs out. It's fantastic.
For some reason, I watched the sequel before I watched the first one. I enjoyed the sequel just in a sort of, this is absolutely awful, but I'm enjoying the nonsense that comes with it. So it is a good call, to be honest. But like, there's a reason that there aren't any other WWE studio films on any other list yet. They are generally absolutely god awful. In fact, I watched one last night, which is called The Main Event, and it's one of the worst films I've ever seen. It's genuinely bottom 10 of all time. It was unreal. It's on Netflix. I'd say watch it, but you'd probably hate me forever if you did. So, some honourable mentions. I've got 3. A film called Sisters, which is starring Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. They play sisters, obviously you can tell from the title. Their parents are selling their childhood home. They decide to throw one last party. And John Cena plays the drug lord who is supplying everyone with drugs in it. He's not in it a massive amount, but he steals every scene that he's in. He's fantastic. Mad Max Fury Road, starring Nathan Jones. We've mentioned Mad Max Fury Road a few times on this podcast. It's a fucking incredible watch. And the other one, it's a personal favourite. It is starring Captain Lou Albano, and it is the Super Mario Brothers Super Show back from the 80s. I loved that series. So that's my other one. Matt, what are your honourable mentions, please?
So, very topical at the moment for his now appearance in All Elite Wrestling, but we've got Big Show, or Paul White, in The Waterboy as Captain Insano. That was a nice cameo appearance. Now, when I sent you the list ahead of time, Andy, we mentioned about the fact that I hadn't had the wrestler in my list because this list is about the wrestlers that appeared in the films, not the best films that have wrestlers in. It would be a very different list otherwise for me. And I've talked about how I love the wrestler before anyway. But Ernest the Cat Miller, Ron Killings is in it, and some very early, I think, Cesaro or Claudio is in it as well, amongst others. So basically, the wrestler in any capacity as a film. And Jake the Snake / Mick Foley in the excellent Peanut Butter Falcon. It was just, I don't think their characters just had enough time to shine in that film for them to make my list completely. But they were really, really good. Jake the Snake, especially playing like the pissed off grizzly veteran that was, unhappy that he never made it anywhere in a backyard slum in the middle of the deep south. I think he did that really well in Peanut Butter Falcon.
Yeah. I've always been a big fan of Jake the Snake. I mean, he's one of the most believable characters or believable performers who ever wrestled for me. Like his promos are just incredible. It was very much the approach of, you don't need to say it loud, but if what you're saying means something, people will listen. I think I think in another life he could quite easily have been a big name bastard actor, like a horrible villain in films.
Yeah.
I think in a different life. Yeah. Stu, your honourable mentions, please.
You know what? That film, I'm convinced that they are listening to us, because that film got recommended to me again on Netflix the other day, and I'm almost at the stage now where I just don't want to watch it just to piss them off. It's it's already been pretty much mentioned all by Ash. I mean, Hobbs and Shaw, Expendables, Fast 5+. They're all there on the list. But the one that hasn't, for whatever reason, in Daddy's Home 2, John Cena. Just class. Watch it, Andrew. Watch it.
Absolutely not. It's never going to happen.
When John Cena comes home as your stepdad, the premise in itself, it's just perfect. Neither of them films should work, but they just do. And that, with all the other stuff that's been mentioned on this podcast today, I think that's probably got more relevance and more street cred than anything. A lot of stuff on here. So just next Christmas, do back to back, Daddy's Home 2. Watch them both.
Yeah, we'll see. Ash, what's your honourable mentions?
I can't believe it's not been mentioned yet, but the glorious ladies of wrestling, Netflix's finest. 3 series of quite brilliant TV. I can't believe it got cancelled before the finale of season 4. It's got cameos from Brodus Clay, Carlito, John Morrison, Chavo Guerrero, Alex Riley, if you want to go down that route. But Alison Brie is fantastic in it. Mark Merron. It's a brilliant TV show, taken from us too soon.
Yeah, I'm gutted, really. There's only 2 shows that have been cancelled because of the pandemic, which have genuinely pissed me off. One is a show called I'm Sorry, which was brilliant. They started filming the 4th season, and then because COVID hit, they cancelled it 6 months later. And we also lost Glow. And I genuinely have no idea why, because there is an appetite for it and fans genuinely seem to love it. Have you seen that one, Stu? Yeah, I couldn't remember if you'd watched Glow. I think you have, haven't you, Matt, as well?
Yeah, I've watched it. Yeah.
But there was an article about this, about Netflix's business practice and stuff, and where they don't release figures to the public, but they know what people watch. And even though if it's just a dedicated small audience, it doesn't matter. For some reason, it's not getting eyes on the product, even though it kind of is. So unless it gets mega numbers, then after season 2, it's gone, which is just madness, really. And it's kind of like there's a lot of things on there, like the AO, is it? That I was kind of, it's been on my list, and then it's just cancelled before the end, and I thought, well, I'm not going to watch that now. Just, if you're going to, something like that doesn't rely on adverts, why don't you just say, well, we'll give you this amount of series, do that, and then that's it.
That would make more sense.
Yeah, don't cancel it halfway through, or 3 out of 4. Just bollocks.
But I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, they gave Glow a 4th season originally and then pulled it a few months later because of the pandemic, which is a really shitty thing to do. But yeah. Sorry, Ash, anyway, your other honourable mentions?
See, I went down a different route with mine. I went down the musical route. Now, you'd have to go to possibly Flair's or a Pop World, but you'd always hear Stu, sit up. You'd always hear the 5 Megamix. I take you to Everybody Get Up and the lyrics Jimmy Fly Snooker and Stone Cold. Not many songs have wrestling characters in their song lyrics. I've also got 21 Savage's A Ric Flair Drip from 2017. It's got over 700 million streams on Spotify. Absolute superstar song. And then the other one that I had was one that actually featured a wrestler. It's Wyclef Jean, It Doesn't Matter, featuring
Oh
The
my
Rock.
God.
Reached
What
number
about that?
3 in the UK chart as well. Absolute banger.
Yeah, it was a good one. So, I'm amazed that you didn't have Cisco's Thong sung on your list,
Oh,
because that was the video was starring The Big Show. Yeah, there have been a few videos over the years with wrestlers actually appearing in the videos itself. There's one appalling like chick lit country pop song starring AJ Styles. It's fucking horrendous. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but I'll have to find it out and we'll post it on the socials. But yeah,
there's one
of
as
course you've
well
got-
with Timberland featuring The Hives. Called Throw It On Me, or I think it is. And it's got a load of WWE divas in it as well, obviously being, doing good things, I'm sure.
and of course there's the greatest band in the world, Fozzy, starring Chris Jericho.
Well, COVID denier.
Yes, hasn't he got a new band called Quarantine with a K? Yeah. He's a character.
I can't believe we've got to like 7 months of this and the 5 Megamix has never been mentioned once until now. And it's not by me either.
Yeah, that's true.
It's astonishing.
Chris Jericho's got a cameo in himself, hasn't he? Sharknado 3.
Yes, and he was also in the latest Jay and Silent Bob reboot movie as well, because he's now friends with Kevin Smith.
Ah, yes.
Now that's someone we should try and get on the podcast, because Kevin Smith does love a podcast. So I reckon if we can hound him,
So
maybe we'll get him on to answer some questions.
So does Cisco, actually, to be fair. That'll be a
Does
nice
he?
idea.
Okay, there we go. We've got a couple of names that we can try and harass on Twitter. So our number one all-time favourite film starring a wrestler. For me, it was always going to be one starring the most electrifying man in sports and entertainment. It was always going to be a film with The Rock. And that film is Moana. I adore that movie. Like, I'm not a massive Disney fan in general. Like, I like it, but I wouldn't say I love it. But Moana is probably my all-time favourite Disney film. It was the first film I put on when Disney Plus came out. I needed to see what Moana looked like in 4K. And it's absolutely stunning. When you see the water in that ultra high definition, it is beautiful. The story itself is fantastic, about a girl who wants to find her way in the world and bumps into a demigod played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The songs in it are fantastic and fun. It's just, I could talk about it for days, to be honest. I just love it. If you haven't seen it,
Why?
for me, for me, it's up there. It's that and The Little Mermaid are probably my all-time 2 favourite Disney films. Those are the 2 I would tell anyone to watch. Love them, watch them. Yeah, but that's me. Matt, what is your number one, please?
I'm about to break any respect that I had now, because A, the person who's in this film, and B, it's just not like a worldly recognised film and probably will never win an award, potentially a Razzie. I don't know. But no, I've had John Cena in Blockers. Now, Blockers is a film that I think is really, really underrated. It's a coming-of-age film from the eyes of 3 girls that are about to graduate for uni or college, I guess it is over in the States, and they basically have a sex pact, and the parents basically are trying to cock block them. And John Cena plays the archetypal overly protective dad who's massively into his sports, and his daughter's a bit of a tomboy and he wants her to kind of just follow in the sporting footsteps. But he plays this like straight-edged character that gets into these like wacky scenarios, is the best way to put it. But he does it really, really well. Now, John Cena is never going to be like everyone's flavor of the month, but he is involved in some of my favorite matches of all time. In like because of him being the dancing partner to a more talented wrestler. So like Money in the Bank 2011 with CM Punk is one of my favorite matches of all time. And that it isn't a great match without John Cena being there as someone to boo. And I think his acting chops are underrated, and he's always going to be in The Rock's shadow because he's come back 5 years too late, and he'll always be an understudy to The Rock in that respect. But slowly but surely, he's bringing out like better performances. Daddy Home 2 is fantastic in it. I hasten to say. And he's really, really good in this, and I'm really like looking forward to seeing him in Suicide Squad 2 as well. And I think he's massively underrated. I mean, from what I understand, there are elements of him being a pretty shitty human being behind the scenes in wrestling, but his work with like Make-A-Wish and everything like that as well. You know, he puts a lot of time into his charity work as well, and I think he's been for me, he's very much he got WWE through some not so successful times on the back end of the Attitude Era, much like Bret Hart did after the Golden Era of wrestling. And he never really will be put on that Mount Rushmore when I think he probably deserves to be, if only for his star power, not his wrestling appeal. But Blockers is a really good film, and if you haven't seen it, go out of your way. It's not going to intellectually stimulate you, but it is a good laugh.
Yeah, I fully expected that to just be a proper middle of the road, sub American Pie kind of film, and it's not at all. It is a lot better than I went in expecting. I properly enjoyed that.
It's got heart,
and John Cena
substance.
was a big reason.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. If you like that kind of film, Matt, there was a film out a couple of 3 years back called Booksmart, which is a similar premise. That's available on Netflix at the minute.
Oh, nice.
That's about two girls who try and live their last life, their last week at school, and do all the things that they didn't do before because they spent all their time studying, and then they just try and live a little. Really good movie. I'd definitely recommend that one too if you enjoy Blockers.
Nice.
Stu, your number 1, please.
Both the actor and the character have already been named, and it's Dave Bautista in Guardians of the Galaxy. Again, similar theme. No clue what this was about. Didn't know really anything about Guardians of the Galaxy going into it. As a fully paid up member of the MCU fan club at the time, thinking, well, they can't do anything wrong, but this is a bit of a step too far. With Bradley Cooper as a rabbit from later on. And then Dave Bautista comes on with this kind of scars all over himself, and it's a comic genius. And where did that come from? Going back afterwards and finding out who he actually was, because this was before my time of getting kind of back into wrestling at all. It was just, I couldn't believe it. It was just, I know they milked it a bit for the second one because it was such a hit, and he's just so stupid. and yet it works. And I've been watching them all again, and I've watched them over 3 weeks, and the two Guardians films and Infinity War, because they're all in it, it's superb. It's just superb. The whole cast, but him especially. I've got the little. Ash has got his Funkos there, but I've got my little Guardians figures beyond the telly over there, and the Guardians ones were the first ones that I started with because I loved it so much.
Yeah, I love Batista in that film. So I watched wrestling like way back in the late 80s, and then stopped until the late 90s for the Attitude Era, and then stopped from just as Batista was becoming a thing. I wasn't watching then, so I didn't really know who he was. I knew him, I knew his face, and I knew that he was a wrestler, but when I heard that he was going to be in this massive film, I was a bit like, okay. And it was a property that I didn't know anything about, so I had very low expectations. And he absolutely knocked it out of the park. He was brilliant. And then having now listened to him on a handful of podcasts where he talks about his struggles in getting into Hollywood, because he wasn't The Rock, because he looked like he was just a meathead. People never took him seriously. and he went away and he had acting lessons and actually got taught how to act. He really put his heart and soul into making something in the movie business. So of everyone who's gone on to do it, I genuinely feel the most pleasure in seeing him do it because I know how hard he's worked to do it, and he deserves all the success he gets. Fantastic.
Yeah. And then obviously he went on to do Final Score as well, which is we could all relate to.
Yeah, Final Score. If you, you can check us out because we actually discussed this on our other podcast, the Wolves Fancast, where we discuss football films occasionally. So yeah, check that out. It's in the back catalogue over on there. It was an interesting film. Let's put it that way. So, what is your favourite, please, Ash?
So this one, I didn't go with my favourite wrestlers. I went for my favourite film that had a wrestler in. Because I've never seen Jesse Ventura wrestle. I was too young for it. But I had to go for Predator. I think Predator is a fantastic movie. Another Arnie film in the list. Another Carl Weathers film in the list after Rocky III. But he is obviously not in it for too long. He ends with a less than desirable fate. But as an action film, Predator is up there, I think. It's one of those classic 80s films that turns towards the last, say, half an hour into more of a sci-fi film. But that first half an hour where they're taking down the camp, the amount of explosions, oh my God, the budget for that must have been fantastic. Just watching them blow everything to shit was brilliant.
Yeah, and he's the pure is the epitome of 80s man as well. And walking around with a Gatling gun under his arm, and some of obviously the famous line's a bit questionable now, but it's the 80s, so it doesn't matter. And yeah, for that reason, that's why it was the first one that went on my list. Obviously, again, way too young to know him from that, but I did see an interview with him, and he was saying that he had a 1-inch bigger bicep than Arnie, and it was actually a prank that Arnie got the costume department to play on him so that he'd do an arm wrestle with him, and when they compared in the diner, and he beat him. So, but it's a kind of, you can imagine the testosterone on the set of that film.
To be fair, Ventura's actually got some good lines in it. I know that obviously you've got "Get to the Jobber" and other ones, but in that he's got when he gets hit and they say to him, "You're hit, man, you're bleeding." He goes, "I ain't got time to bleed." It's like, go on, Jesse.
Fantastic. I don't think I've seen the first Predator all the way through. I saw the sequel first. I think the sequel was like a premiere on Sky way back when. So I watched that, and it's okay. And then the first one was on like ITV4 or something one night, and I'd missed the first half of the film, so I only watched the second half. It is one that I do need to go back and revisit, because I remember really enjoying what I saw, but I thought I still only know half the story here, so it's one that's on the list to go back and revisit. But yeah, some good choices there. I've really enjoyed chatting wrestling and film. It's a rare crossover. So obviously, please let us know what your top 5s are, or if you've just got any films that you really enjoy which star a wrestler, please let us know on the Twitter. That's @Cage Fighting Pod. Next up, we are treating ourselves to a break from Cage again, but we're going to be keeping it wrestling themed, and we're going to be watching 2020's Money Plane, starring Adam Edge Copeland, Kelsey Grammer, Thomas Jane, and Denise Richards. I cannot wait for you boys to watch this film. I really can't. The film is described as a professional thief with a $40 million debt, and his family's life are on the line, must commit one final heist, rob a futuristic airborne casino filled with the world's most dangerous criminals. It is wild. It's just, it's incredible. It's available to rent on Prime Video. It's also on Sky Store, and weirdly, it is cheaper to buy it on Sky Store than it is to rent it on Sky Store. So I don't know what that tells you about the film. Obviously, if you've seen the film, or if you've seen any good films at all lately, why not send us a review? You can do that by dropping us an email or even a voice clip to cagefightingpod@gmail.com, and we will include you next time out. Thank you for joining us on our weird and wonderful walk through the wrestling world. We hope you've enjoyed it. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast and that you can leave us a review. So for another week, Matt, would you like to say goodbye?
Take it easy, guys. Look after yourself.
Stu, would you like to say goodbye?
I have famously large turds. Goodbye.
Ash, thank you very much for joining us this week. We really appreciate it. Would you like to say goodbye as well?
See you later, guys.
And it's goodbye from me. And remember, be excellent to each other.
And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so.